Do I look sexy?
You do. I'm digging the hair, dude.
Well, we've got
Seriously.
that up. We've got that recorded now that you think that. All right, excellent. All right, breaker, one-niner on interwebs. Get your ears on for the GMB Fitness Skills Show over the next, let's say, 20 minutes plus or minus this time. I think it's going to be a little shorter than usual. We're going to talk about how to get strong, how to get agile, and how to do all these things, having fun and doing things you actually enjoy. My name's Andy. Here's Ryan, and let's rock.
Let's do it. Let's do it, man. I'm
Cool.
digging
So today, we're going to talk a little bit about breathing. It's actually kind of an interesting coincidence. Not too long ago, Ryan and our friend Al Cavadlo, like maybe 2 days apart, kind of posted videos that referenced breathing and also their shared love of smiling. So
that is funny, yeah.
yeah.
It was not planned.
And so we've gotten some questions since then, and some comments and different things. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about breathing because it's mildly important.
A little bit
important. Yeah. But first, is there anything you want to say before we get into that, Ryan?
I'm just excited for what the future holds for all of us. The reason I say that is, you come into, you got the new year, and when it's already April right now, and a lot of people, they have the momentum in January, and they're like, yeah, we're going to go, and blah, 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 and it kind of starts to fade off. Well, the cool thing about what we're doing at GMB is we're just getting going, and it's pretty exciting. So for those of you out there who are starting to kind of fade, hang in there, reevaluate. I don't want to say your goals or things like that, but really, if you do have a particular goal that you're working on, reevaluate it, find the passion in that goal again, and keep hitting it. So
yeah, and everyone has ups and downs and things, and everyone has stuff that life gets hectic and stuff. The past month for me has been really, really hard. I had my parents in town visiting my family for 2 weeks. I had a friend from Sweden. I had an old friend and her husband who were in town for a while. And I got a chance to meet our friend Steve Cam from Nerd Fitness. He was here. And all these things, plus a bunch of stuff with work and all of this stuff going on. And we all have this. So what I'm getting at is that it happens.
Yeah.
And so now all of these things are now over, and I'm really happy that I'm able to just get back into doing the things that I really like doing, get back on my schedule and just focus on my real goals. So, we've said it before, we've said it in blog posts, we've said it on videos, we've said it on the show too. If something happens and it gets in your way and you feel like you hit a roadblock or that you lost momentum or something, just start again.
Yeah.
And so Q1 is over, right? We're into April now. We're into the second quarter of the year. So now is the time. Start again. Reevaluate if you need to, but start again. And if you need help, get help. Join Alpha Posse if you're into the GMB thing. Tons of people there that will be so happy to cheer you on, give you advice, and help you out. Or just do something else.
Find something you want to do and get support for it.
Find some support and start it. But don't let a lack of progress, if you realize that, oh shit, first quarter of the year is over and I haven't done any of my goals or made any progress, don't let that stop you. Take that as a chance to start again. People have this big thing about, first of the year, New Year's, and they want to start new things. Well, it's the first of the quarter, so now's a good time to renew that motivation and that drive.
Yeah, nice. Let's get into talking about breathing now.
Yeah. Kick it off.
Go ahead. So breathing, interesting thing. It's just one of those things we take for granted, and of course, if you don't breathe, you're gonna die. It's that simple. But why are we bringing this up?
Pretty soon.
Yeah, pretty soon. 4 minutes usually. That's about it. So, breathing is an interesting thing because we think we can do it because we've been doing it our whole lives. But
Yeah.
what we found and what we all know, and if you take a look at yourself when you're learning a new skill or something like that, chances are you're holding your breath. Now, for some particular things that can be okay. We talk about, let's say, a different concept of breathing like a power breath, where maybe if you're performing squats or heavy deadlifts or something like that, where you might hold your breath throughout the movement. But generally, for a lot of the stuff that we want to do here in GMB, we want to make sure that we're not holding our breath. So if you're working on like an L-sit or a bent arm stand or something like that, you want to make sure that you have natural breathing. The trouble arises when we first learn the skill. It's tough. And I'm not just talking about GMB. This is across the board for anything. It can be martial art. It can be when you're playing soccer, learning how to do a new kick or something like that. Chances are you're going to hold your breath, brace, because you want to put power into it and just smoke through that particular movement or hold. In the beginning, it can be really rough because it's tough. There's a lot of things that you got to think about when you're trying to learn a new skill. And the last thing that we really think about is our breath. But really, that's one of the most important things. Your breath will gauge the intensity. And so sometimes, if you're holding your breath and you don't realize it, the skill can actually be harder than it really should be. So something, and this is what I mentioned in the video that we put out the other day, is I like to tell people to smile when they're performing movement. And I'm not talking about grimacing. I'm talking about actually showing some teeth and performing the movement. The reason for this is found that you can't, I mean you could, but it's difficult to brace if you're smiling, because you have to relax your neck when you're performing these movements. So like, let's say the L-sit. When you're pushing down, pulling the shoulders back, trying to bring your chest up, if you're holding your breath, your shoulders are going to raise up, and that's not what you want. It is tough. This also keeps you in check. And so it could be that you're working at too high of a level for you, and you need to bring it down. So your breath, and focusing on the breath and making sure that you are breathing, is going to help you to find the level that you should be at.
One thing is, you mentioned power breathing, in passing, and so I also want to make sure that, just for anyone that's watching this that doesn't really know what that is, let's just explain briefly what that is, what power breathing.
A power breath can be where you take a large inhale before you perform a movement. You hold the breath by bracing down, and then as you're performing the movement, you continue to hold the breath until you're at the apex of that movement or the end of the movement, and then you release the breath. So that's a power breath. In other systems, it might be a little bit different, but basically, that when I think of power breathing, that's what I think of. The hold, perform the movement, then exhale. So it's one movement. Now,
and that's really common in powerlifting, in any kind of sport that relies on maximum power at any given moment. They're pretty much going to see power breathing, and it's not bad. So we're not saying that it's evil or it's going to kill you or you're going to give yourself an aneurysm or anything, because that's just totally not true.
When done correctly, yes.
Yeah, when done correctly. But we're saying that for the skills that we practice and the way that we set up our training, it's not always appropriate. For some things, it definitely is. But for most of what we do, especially when we're talking about skill work, it's not appropriate. And in fact, if you find yourself power breathing while you're trying to do skill work, it's just like Ryan just said, it means that you're trying to do a skill that's actually beyond what you should be working on. You should be able to control your breath while you're working a skill, while you're practicing, because if you have to force or brace, then it means that you're not able to exercise the kind of control, right? If you can't control your breathing, you can't control other things either, right? So you should be working at a lower level.
And this can also, I mean, to take it even further and looking at our daily life, if you find yourself bracing, maybe you're speaking with someone and you don't really get along with that person, you might find yourself breathing. You might find yourself getting excited when you're
Yeah.
talking to that person. Something that I found interesting when I teach children and they're having issues during class, to try and bring them down a little bit, I'll try and get them to match my breathing by regulating my breathing. This is a teaching technique that I use with actually a lot of students if they're over breathing, things like that, trying to talk them down and get them on the level of breathing. But that's going a little bit deeper, but this also goes into your daily life too. When you have a lot of stress, focus on your breath. It's something good to do. Going back, semi-related to the power breathing, a way that you can actually help increase, well, lung capacity is one way of looking at it, but another way is bettering your breath is actually sitting down and focusing on your breath. There are different ways to do this.
Wait, you mean by practicing breathing and being aware of my breathing, I can get better at
It's
it?
a pretty amazing
What
concept.
kind of bullshit are you
Amazing
talking?
concept. Actually, one of the very first certifications I ever got was a 200-hour yoga certification. I mean, this is way back. And
Yeah.
I just remember one of the things that really I enjoyed for just some weird reason, maybe some of you might be like, what, was the breath work. I mean, that was quite possibly the best part I thought of the whole thing. And I carried that with me, use a lot as far as meditation and things like that, focusing on the breath. Now, I've always wanted to go deeper and learn more about the breathing technique, so I actually got into apnea, or in this case I'm talking about free diving, holding your breath while submerged in water, not necessarily sleep apnea, which is bad, where you might die. But in order to actually get better at my breathing, I focused on breath retention. And so this is another option that you can work on. This is not power breathing. This is actually focusing on holding, filling up the lungs as much as possible and relaxing while holding your breath. I actually prepared a few things, some good reference material. Breathology, the book, is a good book about that. And actually something that recently, interesting enough, over the past couple weeks, I've gotten back to, and I'm rereading a lot of it, is called The Manual of Free Diving. This book is absolutely incredible. It's not just talking about holding your breath. It's just relaxation, being able to deal with stress in other situations. And this is extremely good because, like we said earlier, when you're working on a skill, if you're holding your breath, it quite possibly means that you're working at a level that's beyond your capacity, your work capacity. So we always want to make sure that the movements that we're performing, the holds that we're performing, are beautiful. And one of the only ways that you can do that is by having the proper breath. So what is the proper breath? Breathing naturally. That's what it is. And being comfortable with doing it.
Yeah, and before we go on, I just want to say that both of those books, will have the links to those if you want to read those. We'll put them on the blog post for this episode, so make sure you check that.
And these are just two examples of books that I enjoy. Of course, there's yoga books out there. Wonderful Light on Yoga. That's it.
Light on Yoga is something that pretty much I think everyone should read that anyway.
Yes.
Some of the philosophical stuff is a little weird. But it's one of those books that's a classic.
It's solid. It's good stuff.
Yeah, anyone can learn from that.
But breathing, really, I mean, it's not rocket science, really.
No.
It's just a matter of being aware of your breath, like you said, Andy.
One thing I want to say, like you said, it's not rocket science, and so we all come from a martial arts background at GMB, and I especially come from a very traditional Japanese martial arts background where I grew up hearing that if you could learn to breathe a certain way, you could direct your ki and shoot fireballs from your ears or something. I'm not sure exactly what they were trying to say that we would eventually be able to do, but there were all kinds of magical abilities that were ascribed to breath practice. And to be honest, most of that is complete and utter bullshit. But the interesting thing is, through practicing various breath control techniques, I feel like I have a pretty efficient breathing patterns. you know, and it's mostly just because I practiced specific patterns of breathing. Not that those patterns themselves are good, but that I practiced patterns and got good at them. And but basically, I was practicing breathing and being aware of my breath.
Exactly.
So you don't need to practice special patterns, and that's really what I want to get to, because some people will try to tell you that there are special breathing patterns that you can master that will allow you to shoot fireballs, or just allow you to lift more weights, or allow you to do whatever. And true, there may very well be optimal breathing patterns for specific movements. That may be correct, but let me tell you this, and I promise, you are not an exception to this. Whoever you are watching this, you are not an exception. You will never master any advanced breathing technique sufficiently to be able to apply it under pressure in an optimal way. You will never ever achieve this unless you are doing something for like decades. Like if you're a free diver and you were practicing the free diving kind of breathing technique in that situation over and over again, yes, you will probably be able to practice and master optimal breathing. But if you're trying to learn like 3 different breathing techniques for different kinds of movements because somebody told you that they're optimal, well, I'm sorry, but that's pretty much just not going to work.
So basically what you're saying is work on one thing and understand that.
Yeah. If you're doing free diving, there's really like, yeah, if you're doing free diving or something, there's like 1 or 2 techniques that you learn probably, and you master them and practice them over and over again to the point that they then become habit.
Sure.
Right? Well, then that's your habitual way of breathing again. But if you're trying to get to the point where you're a breathing master and you can choose the correct breathing technique in a certain situation, I don't believe that's possible. Because I think breathing is a habit, and I think that we have to practice to be able to control that habit or improve that habit, but we're never going to get to the point where we have a perfect optimal control over our sympathetic nervous system. I'm sorry, it's just that's not the way it works. So yes, if there's a specific movement that there is a specific breathing technique that's right for, practice it to the point that it's habitual, but don't think that you will ever master the manipulation of breathing techniques.
Yeah, no, and I see where you're going with that. Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. It's interesting because you can take a master, and let's say a judo master, and you look at them, and when you're doing judo with them, the body is not there. It's like you're just fighting a gi, right? And their breathing is just amazing. And then you take them out of their element and put them in something completely new. What do you find? They're going to brace up. They're going to forget those breathing habits. Yes. They're going to hold. And so, like what you're saying right there, you might be a master at one particular way of doing something, but when you change the environment, it's going to change the breathing. And so that's
that's why we just say natural breathing is great for skill work, because there may be a better way to breathe for some skills. But you know what? It's situational, and it's just far better to get to the point where you can execute a skill with natural breathing, because then it means that you are comfortable enough at that level of skill that you can just be pretty relaxed and fall back on your habits.
Exactly. And so a good way to practice this then is to get away from that skill or whatever that you're working on. Sit down. Literally sit down and focus on your breath. See what you're doing when you're in a relaxed state, okay? Then take it up a little bit, and whether that be standing or maybe walking, and focus on the breath. Then a little bit more so that you're building up to that skill, so that when you get to that skill, you can focus on the breath. Yes. And so that's just a way to practice your breathing.
Yeah. And we have also on our blog where you've written some of your a couple of introductory breathing practices that you've written, and we'll link to those from this as well, that you can check those out if somebody wants to practice breathing. Some very basic things.
Very basic, yes.
They're basic, but they're more than adequate if you practice them. Yes. If you just read them and say, "Oh, well, I can do that," that's not going to help you. Just like anything else. Exactly. But if you actually practice them, they'll teach you a lot.
Yeah.
So definitely check those out if you want to practice it, and I recommend that you should want to practice this.
It's just Benny Ferguson, this morning I noticed that the video that we posted yesterday, he reposted it, shared it on his Facebook thing, and we actually talked about this briefly in the interview that we did with Benny, and the bracing side of it and breathing. It's interesting because it's something that we should all know about, but because it's a habit that we can all do, just like we can all walk. It's something that you really don't focus on. So it comes back to being aware. Everything we want to do in GMB, we're doing a skill, if we're warming up, if we're stretching, it's about being aware of what's going on inside of our body, our breathing, and our mental state too. So it's all related.
Yeah,
all
definitely.
Related.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
So I think that's great. We could talk about this for probably hours, but the most important thing for you to get out of this is, if you want to practice breathing, look at some of the links that we're going to have here. But it always comes back to awareness of what you're doing. Practice and be aware, and you'll get better. For breathing, don't worry about fireballs and shit. Seriously.
Dragon Ball. I think that's the name of that. I don't even watch animated things, but yeah.
You mean you live in Japan and you don't watch anime?
Actually, the other day, there's another foreigner here, and they were talking about that, and I was like, "What is that?" And they're like, "Dude, you don't know." I'm like, "Sorry, it wasn't into comic books and stuff like that. I'll go in the other room for you, okay?" So, anyway, all right, man. I think that pretty much covers the breath today.
Yes.
Any questions? Want to give us a shout out? Feel free to click the little button and tell us hi, what you think of the podcast, the show, pardon me, and let us know some things that you'd like for us to talk about in our upcoming shows.
Oh, and I will say, we do also still have the podcast available on iTunes, and those tend to be updated about a day before we post these on the website. So if you want a head start, you can actually go and subscribe to us in iTunes there too, and you'll get things on average about a day before we actually post it to anybody else. So you can feel super special, and you can listen to us on Thursday instead of Friday. All right. Woo! All right. So thanks again, and we'll chat with you again soon.
Laters.